Hey guys, in this video we're going to be repairing a coaster brake. Here we got a coaster brake, and what I found is a lot of people are intimidated by coaster brakes. They don't want to take them apart, they're afraid they won't be able to put it back together again. Well, I'm hoping this video will change that. It's actually really easy to take apart a coaster brake, service it, put it all back together. So I'm going to show you how. So we start by simply taking off the axle nut on both sides. So you can leave it on the other side, it doesn't matter. So the next thing you're going to need to do is take those two nuts off, and you're going to need a cone wrench and a 17mm. So you take the cone wrench and you put that on the inner one. Take the 17. Okay, that's your jam nut. Take your 17, hold this jam nut on the other side, and then crack those loose. Then you should be able to take this off by hand. At this point, lay the thing down so you don't lose the bearings in case they're loose. So there's our bearing race. And this part we just pull out as we turn it counterclockwise, and it comes out. There's the bearing race. This is basically one assembly right here. Pull out this bearing, your mechanics pick. Then the whole thing just drops out. You want to have like a rag or something here to catch the parts. So now the axle, or the hub is hollow. So that's ready to be cleaned. And then you're left with this. These are the actual brake pads right here. This is the brake pad actuator spring. And it slides off, like so. And you have one more bearing back here. Just take all that stuff off. And before it goes over to the solvent tank, I just grab a rag and wipe the excess grease off first. It's kind of a waste of degreaser to make it work that hard when you can just take the majority of it off with a rag. So that being said, not all of these parts really need to go into the solvent tank or the degreaser tank. Like the brake pads themselves just need to be wiped down. Just get the old grease off. Set them aside on a rag. The bearings are in good shape. You can do the same with them. If they're full of dirt, then they probably need to go to the degreaser and get totally cleaned. But if they're pretty clean, there's no dirt in them, it's just a little bit of old grease, that's good enough. So those were easy. The little one here, it's got a little crud on it, so that one I'm going to go ahead and throw in the tank. Definitely going in the tank because there's all kinds of dried up crusty grease and dirt and hair in there and all kinds of nasty stuff. Same with this thing here. I'm just going to wipe it down, but I'm still going to take it and wash all that old crustiness off of there. And then this actuator needs to be cleaned as well. So aside from the brake pads and the outer bearings, I'm basically washing everything else. So once you've got all that done, you should have a pile that looks kind of like this. You got your two clean bearings, your brakes, your two little brake pads, your actuator, the rotor, or I should say the cog, it's not a rotor, axle. And you can leave the brake lever and this on here. That doesn't need to be messed with at all. And now it's ready to be cleaned. Our cleaner of choice is good old Purple Power. Engine degreaser, auto, home, industry, farm, marine. They didn't mention bicycle, but it works pretty good on bike parts too. So you can use this stuff full strength, but I'm going to go ahead and dilute it down to about a 50% solution. It is a water-based degreaser, but it is really hard on your hands, so you need to wear gloves. The first time I used this stuff, it curled my fingernails up. So I always wear gloves when I mess with this stuff, unless I'm just going to be in here for a second. Parts, and I'll catch you guys in a second. And bam! Now we got a bunch of clean parts, a clean wheel, and put this thing back together. And to do so, we need some grease. So our grease of choice is this old Rock and Roll Red Devil grease, which works pretty good. If you don't have a bicycle specific grease, another good one to use is this old Lucas Oil Red and Tacky, which can be found literally at any auto parts store, and this stuff works just great as well. You want a good tacky grease that's not going to dry out too quickly on you. There's another one here that I'm not going to use, that I use on bearings and things like that. This one would dry out a little bit quickly in a high heat situation like the coaster brake. And I don't think I would recommend a super web grease in that case. It'd probably work for a while, but I think you would have to repack it sooner than if you used a sodium-based grease versus a lithium-based grease, which is basically what the difference is. So we start with the axle. Take your activation, I don't know what this hell is called, actuator, your brake actuator. Chuck it in some grease. Get it kind of nice and saturated inside and out. Just pour grease on everything basically. Oh, grab a bearing too. Same thing. Just get it really saturated. You put that bearing back in there first, of course. And then just excess grease. Just pack right inside of all those crevices right there. Take your actuator. See, it's got those two prongs right there. It's going to line up with those two tabs. Just like that. And that keeps it from spinning. Okay? Go ahead and dab some more grease on the sides of this thing. And then grab your brake pads. You'll notice that this stuff is pretty tacky. It's pretty sticky. So without it, this job is really hard because you basically just have to apply these straight to the actuator and the axle. You set this bottom part here. This faces the bearing side. So you got your bearing here. Make sure that just goes right here. In between the two tabs that are on the axle. Same with the other side. And then just go ahead and put more grease on them too. So if you do it like this and you just kind of saturate everything with grease really good, the assembly kind of stays together. So next, grab your wheel. So there's two sides, a large and a small opening. You want to go through the larger opening and just shove that all the way through there. Now hold it so it doesn't move on you. Grab your little bearing, saturate it with grease. Grab your big bearing, throw it in the grease, same thing, saturate it. Big bearing's going to go in next. And just sit right on that bearing cup. Feel free to pack that with excess grease, and any excess grease on your fingers you can wipe off inside of there. So next, we're going to take this with the cog and we're going to insert it while turning it clockwise, and you'll see as you turn it clockwise that gap will close, and you just want it to stay closed. Once it is, you want to kind of hold it still grab your other bearing, which should already have grease on it, and just pop it on in there. You know, you could probably use a little more. Okay. Now grab your bearing brace, nut, thread it onto the axle, and do this all the way until you bottom out. This one you don't need to make any tighter than finger tight. Okay, there we are, we're bottomed out. Next, take the jam nut, thread it on next. At this point, you can go ahead, take your gloves off, wipe this thing down with a rag before you make any final adjustments. Just get those two bottomed out by hand, and then you can let go of the thing and kind of clean the mess up. So just wipe all that off. I'm not going too crazy, but I'm just getting the majority of the grease. It's still going to have that greasy residue, and I'll show you what I'm going to do about that here in a second. Cool. So now that that's there, grab your wrenches. I always like to feel with the wrenches the preload right there. You know, it's just a certain feel you get for it. There you go. So now to clean it, there's this product here called Finish Line Showroom Polish and Protectant. So just spritz a little of that on there. It's kind of like this weird water-based cleaner. Hold on a second. It's supposed to give it 10 seconds. Got a little hasty there. This at first will degrease the bike and clean any dirt or anything on it, and then it kind of solidifies to this Teflon surface that resists dust and dirt and whatnot. It shines. So that's how you rebuild coaster brake. I gotta go. Catch you guys in the next video. Peace.